Hello, and welcome to another Wednesday Walkie Talkie in the ever-changing climate here. Today it's warm when the sun's out and cold when it goes behind a cloud, and it's kind of wet and raining, and although it's not raining at this very moment, it has been, which is in sharp contrast to the absolute thermal hellhole from 7 days ago. Anyway, another Wednesday, another walkie-talkie, and what to chat about today? Well, I do actually have a topic today. I haven't really in the past couple of weeks, but I do today. And that topic is how the internet has changed gaming, and not necessarily for the better, I have to say. There's multiple ways to look at this, but I'll start out first of all in terms of the actual quality of the games. Now, we could kick off and go about the whole digital distribution versus physical media, but I've already discussed that. Now, this is about games being released that are clearly not finished because, well, the internet online has given game developers, studios and publishers the opportunity to fix the game after it comes out. Now, that was a sort of worrying trend a few years ago, that release now, patch later. Basically, if you're a gamer that gets the game on launch day, these days you're basically an unpaid tester. You're unpaid QA. In fact, you're paying for the privilege to run quality control or quality assurance and bug finding and all this stuff on a game that previously studios employed a team of people to do that. They probably still do, but they don't clearly don't do a thorough enough job of fixing the games before they come out. Now, during the sort of Xbox 360 generation, you started to see a proliferation of that, especially towards the end of it. PS3 generation. That wasn't the start, though. It did start in the original Xbox era, but not to the extent that it started in the 360 era, and then going into the Xbox One, PS4, and now the current day. Nearly every game that comes out ends up either having a day one patch or a series of patches to fix ongoing issues during the launch window and even beyond. It's bizarre to see a game get patched sort of 12, 18 months, sometimes even a few years post-release. It is a bizarre thing. See, God, it's well overgrown now compared to where it was before. It is. I don't particularly want to go down this pathway to my right because it's been raining a bit, and it's going to be a bit hellacious. where all these people have suddenly appeared from, but they can bugger off. Right. So, it's very bizarre to see a game that's been out for a couple of 3 years getting patched. But yeah, that's not the worst of it, really. The worst of it has sort of encouraged how can I put this? It's sort of encouraged games to be released that are sort of, to all intents and purposes, not complete. It has encouraged the whole season pass thing, where games are chopped up and stuff that would have been in the games originally. It's still a bit Savannah-like over there. It's encouraged them to start doing that type of thing, chopping bits out of the game and selling it back to you. The practicalities of doing that pre-proliferation of the internet would have proven to be costly, a lot more costly. You'd have had to release the stuff on disc, and you'd have the packaging and distribution costs. So it'd either have to be quite a substantial update, or they just included the stuff, they didn't take stuff out of the game. And that's the more sort of nefarious thing that they've done, which I'm not happy about. It's not added value, it's taking stuff out and selling it back to you and claiming that it's added value. It's not at all. Big open world games are rife for this. They sell the illusion of a vast game, but most of it's empty. You know, it's either repetitious missions or they're big empty spaces. It's like smoke and mirrors. Anyway, that's a different thing. So yeah, when you look at that element, internet and online has fundamentally changed how games are delivered, not just, like I say, in terms of digital distribution versus physical, but the manner with which games are released. Not all. Some games are, very good games that are complete in themselves, but some are not. Some it's very obvious. But the other side to that is the manner with which games are discussed now. In the past, you'd write a letter into a magazine and that would be pretty much it. Or you'd get a job as a games journalist. And the conversation was much smaller, and there was a degree of gatekeeping about the conversation. There was no guarantee a letter would be printed in a magazine. If you wanted to be a games journalist, you were an employee of a publishing company. So you would have to toe the line there. There are issues of questionable practices in games journalism, often not deliberate but circumstantial, that range back to the 80s even. They range back to the 80s even. And those are those practices, you know, if you think about the whole thing with Zap 64, they were owned by the same company that owned Thalamus Software. I mean, fortunately, many Thalamus games were excellent, but there's no doubt about it. You know, do you honestly think if Thalamus had released an absolute dumpster fire of a game, that it would have suffered the same review score in Zap as it would have done in other magazines, shall we say? I doubt it. I've mentioned before, you know, Ocean Software. Gary Bracey talked about this subject at one of these retro events, you know, and he spoke about how he felt when games got a bad score, and how he himself would go about sort of questioning it, making it like, well, hang on a minute, you know, if we're spending all this, that and the other money on ad revenue and what have you, is it necessarily okay to keep spending that revenue on something or on a magazine that might be hammering your games on review scores? You know, he was protective of his company and the developers. So, yeah, you know, you got the whole Driver 3 debacle. You know, for those of us that were, you know, around at that particular period of time, where a couple of magazine publications got early access reviews, gave the game really high scores, and the game come out and it was an absolute mountain of shit. It was broken. It was not unplayable, but not far off. There was that many game-breaking bugs in it, but more so, it just wasn't a good game. And yet they were giving it 9 out of 10 or 90% or whatever the scoring system was. There was a degree of gatekeeping. There's two sides to that. The sort of the advent of anybody being able to share their views online has been good. You can do your videos on YouTube, you can live stream the game, you can chat about it on social media, there can be a dialogue, and I think that's good. There are always downsides to it though, like with any system. There are those that know negativity sells and will be scouring games for things to criticise. Sometimes it's unwarranted. Sometimes games garner negative attention before they've even come out. Sometimes it's justified, many times it isn't. The new Wolverine game seems to be dividing opinion right now. It doesn't surprise me. Superhero stuff seems to be the front line of this so-called culture war. You know, whether it's superheroes, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever. That seems, you know, that nerdy stuff that, you know, I love it. I love Star Wars, Star Trek. I can't ever profess to being a massive superhero fan. I used to get the odd comic book now and then. I was mostly a Batman fan. It's a very sort of low-level Batman. Few issues of Spider-Man when I was a kid and that type of stuff. But generally speaking, not a comic book nerd at all. I think the most amount of comics I collected as a kid, well, I say when I was a kid, when I was about 11 years old, were the Transformers comics here in the UK. I love Transformers. I love the Gen 1 cartoon that was on. I had some of the toys, and I used to get the comic books. I had them on order at the newsagent every week. The problem we had where I lived was there wasn't really a dedicated comic book store, and the newsagent would only ever get your very sort of massively popular stuff. They didn't really get they didn't get stuff until it got really popular. Of course, I wanted the Transformers comic from when it first started, and it took them a few weeks, and I missed a few, but I was able to get hold of some back issues from a trip I went into Manchester. It's a comic book store, and I was able to get those back issues. So for many years I actually had, from like issue 1 onwards of that. Oh, that's a bit of a detour, isn't it? But anyway, yeah, that was my main thing. So when I see people arguing about superhero stuff online, I have no idea a lot of the time. I'm just like, yeah, okay, I step away from that because I just don't have the knowledge. You know, like I say, most of my superhero stuff was, I like the Incredible Hulk on TV, which I loved that show. I absolutely loved it. But that was it. You know, it was stuff that was on TV. Adam West Batman was my Batman. That's what I grew up on. So comic books always felt quite a departure from that. I was, again, never sure which was supposed to be the real one. When I was a kid, I didn't have, like, you know, is the comic books real or are they a spin-off of the TV show? Well, I was a little kid, didn't really know. But all I knew is that the Adam West Batman I thought was brilliant. But anyway, point is, online has got good and bad things going for it. The good things is that gatekeeping opinion is no longer a thing as such. And I think that's a good thing. I do. I think that is a really good thing. Let's have a look over here. That is nice and still. Look at that. Particularly like closer to here. It's a bit more ripply further out. It's quite still here. There is a slight breeze. You can get an idea there of the sky. Anyway, we'll move on. So, yeah, got all manner of sort of different opinions and views, and that's great. It just gets a bit frustrating sometimes where, you know, people go in, you know, with like a predisposed attitude to something, and you can tell something's going to get absolutely annihilated, opinion-wise. It's going to get annihilated. And as I say, sometimes it's deserved and sometimes it isn't. But I would not want that to be taken away. As somebody who grew up where opinions, like I say, were gate-kept, apart from you just exchanging your views with your mates on a playground at school, you know, or your mates at home. There was a big amount of gatekeeping, and there's no other way of saying it. Like I say, if you wanted to talk about games and have any kind of outreach, you had to be a games journalist, which meant that you had to achieve a certain standard in education, and then have to be fortunate enough to get a job working at a magazine. Quite often, those journalists treated video game journalism as a springboard for a career. It was a stepping stone. Yeah, they like playing video games, but as a career path, they were seeking to go on to other things, whether it be music, movies, getting into other forms of media, writing, so on and so forth. One of the guys, I've forgotten his name now, he was one of the writers on Rogue One. I've forgotten his name, it's gone out of my head. I actually wrote for Ace video game magazine here in the UK. So, you know, he ended up being a screenwriter. I think he wrote the Book of Eli as well, but I might be wrong on that. But he definitely had a hand in the creation of Rogue One, the Star Wars movie from, what is that, about 10 years now? 10 years ago? Anyway, yeah, there's an example for you. I've forgotten his name, bloody hell. But yeah, I'm not saying he wasn't passionate about video games, but it was a stepping stone. And I know that does happen today. There's a lot who have got steam breath. God, is that the first inclination that autumn is upon us, or coming this way soon? Oh, it doesn't feel that cold. But yeah, there's a few people I know that have done that and then ended up getting a job at a video game studio as a writer or consultant or whatever. You know, that's what they ultimately want to do. But the point is, at the very least, there are a lot more voices now, and the gatekeeping is probably as minimal as you're going to get right at this very moment. So I think overall there has been a net positive in that sense. Because the thing that you can also do is you can choose who you listen to and who you don't, who you follow, who you don't, who you subscribe to, who you don't. You know? Personally, I try to get a broad spectrum of opinion from across all different what's the right word? Ideology isn't the right word, really. Don't like that when I'm talking about games and films and stuff, although that is a case, that is a very much a thing. But yeah, I mean, I take on board opinions from a wide range of sources. One of my frustrations with it, though, is how people are dismissive if someone has an opinion that they don't agree with, or has I'm going to have to use the word ideology because at the moment I can't think of a better one, but whose maybe overall ideology doesn't sit well with theirs. And so therefore everything that they have to say is dismissed, which of course is ridiculous, and that's nonsensical. You know, a person is an individual. When this whole putting people into categories never sat well with me. Now, one of the things that we had growing up in my generation, Generation X, was individuality was important. Being an individual was important. Jesus. I think it's like put the puddle in one place on the path. You know, having an individual opinion and being yourself was important. That's frowned upon these days, it feels to me. Somebody's got to be put into a category. Oh, they're a woke lefty, or you know, they're right-wing, alt-right, whatever. And therefore everything that they have to say is completely wrong, which is just not true. You know, you can agree on certain points and disagree on others in life. That's called being normal. It's abnormal if you think that everyone should agree with your view and hold true to your view. That is weird. That would be weird. That's like the Borg. That's a collective. And I don't like that. I don't like that type of shit. That's cult-like behaviour. It really is. People should be free and people should be individual. There's a doggo having his best life in the water. People should be free to have a view and an opinion on something without being dismissed just because another view or another opinion that they have might not necessarily be something that you share with. And I'm pretty certain that shrub has come from nowhere. I don't recall there being a massive big shrub there a few months ago. I'll have to check back on my footage. It may be because of the fact that it's summertime and oh, that dog's having a lot of fun. But I don't know, don't choke there, dude. Yeah, I think like I say, that type of behaviour to me is weird. This blockchain stuff I find weird. You know, where if you follow somebody, but you also follow somebody else, and they see that you follow somebody else that they might not like, they go ahead and block you, and then they add you to a list. Yeah, lists. You know, treating people and putting people on lists. Can't think of it right now, but there was a certain, certain thing that occurred about 80 odd years ago where people were put on lists. That didn't turn out well. We don't tend to classify that as a vintage part of human history. So, putting people on lists because, they follow somebody on social media you don't like. I mean, really? Did you think that they might not follow them for the reasons that you think? And they might follow them because they talk about video games and that part of what they talk about, they happen to enjoy their content on that. It's not necessarily that they agree with them politically. I mean, Jesus Christ, when I was at school, if my friends, if I could only associate with my friends who agreed with my politics, I wouldn't have had many friends. And vice versa, and the same for them. Like back in the 80s and 90s, like somebody's personal politics were just that. These days, it's become something that is a way of judging a person in their entirety, and I just think that is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, that's a rant for something else. What difference does it make if someone's talking about a video game being good or bad, and they're talking about the technical aspects of the game and whether it's fun to play? What the hell difference does it make who they want to vote for? Whether that's left or right. They're talking about a video game. So, you deal with that. You analyse that. If they're talking about, if they start to go full on political with everything too, and that's annoying you, don't follow them. But I mean that's the sort of downside to it. It's created a very cult-like behaviour online, which is not something that I like at all. Anyway, I think all I've got to say about that. I think it's a net positive, is what I'm saying. I think the temptation these days is to go, internet bad. But I think when it comes to discussions about video games or media or whatever, there's so many different views and opinions out there now that I think it's good. The more opinion and the more diverse that opinion is, the better. Like I say, back in the day, that wasn't the case. And as I mentioned earlier, even if you put a letter in a magazine, that's curated. And sometimes it was edited. In fact, a lot of the time the letters were edited. They used to tell you that in the letters page. We reserve the right to edit the letter. And as I say, there was a degree of curation going on. You could write 100 letters to a magazine and never get one published. These days, you just bash it out on... I'm going to rephrase that. These days, you type it out on X or whatever your chosen social media platform is, and boom, you're done. You're out. It's out there. And unless you do something stupid and get yourself banned off it, you're fine to do it. It's the same with YouTube. You can stick a video up. You don't have to wait for Games Master on the TV to find out what, some selected journo's going to say there. But you just have to take the rough with the smooth. Anyway, I'm done. And I'll catch you all later. And see you in the next one.